Alright, in this video we're going to be talking about parallel and perpendicular lines. For your visual reference, this is what parallel lines look like, and this is what perpendicular lines look like. So first, let's talk about the definition. For parallel lines, these are lines that will never intersect. So they're going to keep going forever and ever, whichever direction they're facing, but they're never going to touch. They should never touch. So looking at them graphically, we can see that they'll never touch, but algebraically, we know two lines are parallel if they have the same slope. Right? And then for perpendicular lines, these lines have to intersect, but they have to intersect at like a 90-degree angle. So I could say that this is a 90 degree, this is a 90 degree, this is a 90 degree, this is a 90 degree. So they have to intersect and basically make a plus. So if I just drew two lines, these don't really intersect at 90-degree angles because of the slant. So they have to be straight 90-degree angles. So graphically, that's how we know they're perpendicular lines. Algebraically, we know they're perpendicular lines if they have negative reciprocal slopes, or if the slopes are negative reciprocals. So you may know what that is, you may not. So let's talk about it. Negative reciprocals are flipped fractions where one is negative and the other is not. Right? So just so that you see what I mean by that, if I were to go over a couple examples, if I said, what is the negative reciprocal of 3/4? I'm going to take that fraction, I'm going to flip it to 4/3, and because 3/4 was already positive, I need to make this negative. That would be its negative reciprocal. Right? Let's do a couple more. Remember that all whole numbers can be rewritten over 1. So if I were to take the negative reciprocal of 2, that would be negative 1/2. I'm going to skip number 3 and I'm going to move to number 4. 1/1 is still 1. So if I flip this, it will still be 1/1. It'll just be a negative 1/1. But for 0, 0/1 is still 0. If I flip 1/0, and let's say I make it negative, well, anything over 0 is undefined. So I can say that 0 and undefined are perpendicular lines. And if we think about how that looks graphically, lines that have 0 slope are horizontal. Lines that have undefined slope are vertical. And they intersect at 90-degree angles. Right? So now that we know what negative reciprocals are, now we're going to look at some points and see, are these two lines that these points are going to make parallel, perpendicular, or neither? Let's start with number 1. In order to determine this, we need to look at their slopes. So I'm going to go ahead and label these so that I can write my slope out. Remember, slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Right, so I'm going to find the slope of AB first. So that's going to be 6 minus 3 over 2 minus a negative 2. I'm sorry, that shouldn't be 0. It's 2 minus a negative 2, so that's 4. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and find my other slope, my slope of CD, and label. So that's going to be 3 minus 0 over 3 minus a negative 1. So I have 3 over 4. Once you find the slope of both, you're looking for, are these slopes the same? Are these slopes negative reciprocals? Or are they neither of those two things? In this case, these are the same. So these are parallel. Okay, let's do another one. For number 2, our slope is going to be 4 minus 2 over 5 minus 0. So we have 2/5. And then for our line CD, our line segment in this case, same thing. That's going to be 3 minus 8 over 3 minus 1. So 3 minus 8 is negative 5. 3 minus 1 is 2. I see that these fractions are flipped. One is negative, one is positive. So these are negative reciprocals, which means this is perpendicular. I'm not going to spell that out because I ran out of space, but it is perpendicular. Let's try one more. Right, for this AB, we have 6 minus 8 over 2 minus negative 1. 6 minus 8 is negative 2. 2 minus a negative 1 is positive 3. And then for CD, we have 3 minus 2 over 3 minus a negative 1. So we have 1 over 3 minus negative 1 is 4. So in this case, these slopes are not the same. They're not negative reciprocals. Nothing is, we can't compare these two. So I can say that these are neither. Another case where it might be neither is, let's go back to number 1. Let's say I got 3/4 and negative 3/4. They're not the same because one's negative, one's positive, but they're not negative reciprocals either because one isn't flipped. So that would be another neither case. Just so you can see what I just said. Right? Now we're going to move on to if we're given equations. So if you're given 2 points for 2 different lines, you need to find the slope of both and compare them and see are they parallel, perpendicular, or neither. But if you're given 2 equations, well, one, if the equation is in slope-intercept form, you just need to look at the slope and see are they the same, are they negative reciprocals, are they neither. So for number 9, I can look at these 2 lines, find my slope, see that my slope is the same, And remember that if they have the same slope, these are parallel lines. And that's all you would need to do. There's no work. You don't have to graph these. You can, of course, to see that, but you wouldn't need to. If you remember that the slope is the same, and that means they're parallel. For number 10, if I look at the slope, I have 4/5 and negative 5/4. So this is negative reciprocals, which means these are perpendicular. We're going to jump down to 13 and 14 because, as I said earlier, if it's in slope-intercept form, you don't have any work. Sometimes that will not be the case. Sometimes you will have to convert one of the equations to slope-intercept form, or you might have to convert both of the equations to slope-intercept form. So let's do that. As a reminder, we're trying to get y by itself, so we need to get rid of the x term. And I put this directly underneath it, but that's really because I didn't have space to put it next to it. Here, let's do this. There we go. Because remember, we can't combine those two because they're not like terms. I am going to go ahead and switch those two. And then because I have this negative y, I need to divide everything by negative 1. So this would be positive 5x minus 4. Now when I look at the two slopes, negative 1/5 and positive 5, well, those are definitely reciprocals. One is positive, one is negative. So these are perpendicular. For number 14, same thing, but now we have to do this twice. I'm going to start with the one on the left by moving 3x to the other side and switching the order of these two. And then again, I need to divide everything by negative 1. So I'm left with y equals positive 3x minus 2. Then for this other equation, I need to get rid of 12x. So I have negative 4y equals, I'm going to put my x term first, negative 12x plus 4, and then divide everything by negative 4. So I'm left with y equals positive 3x minus 1. And now I can look at these two and say that I have the same slope, so these are going to be parallel.